Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode. I couldn't have planned that. Couldn't have planned that better myself. So welcome back to another episode of AMA with LCJ. I am excited to have you all joining with me today. We're going to be talking about the gratitude paradigm in leadership. One of the reasons why I really wanted to talk about this gratitude paradigm in leadership is because it's important. We're heading into November, and November is a time where we really talk about and discuss, everybody's talking about Thanksgiving and gratitude, at least here in the United States. And so, one of the things I wanted to hop in and talk about was why gratitude is so important to us as leaders. But give me a moment here. So, if you see that I'm a little extra crispy, it's because I've hooked up a new setup here. And so, I'm excited about that. But I feel like I'm looking like this the entire time. So, I'm gonna raise my screen. This is the reality of being live, I guess. Uh, so we're gonna have a good time as always. One of my requests. What's going on, Carmen? Thank you for joining me. Um, Carmen said, "Good afternoon." I always like to say, "Hey, what's up?" Oh, I love your VR headset, man. Listen, I it's been a while since I've been on my Oculus. That's the place I like to hop in and I'll escape. Side note, really, just a tangent. One of my favorite things to do on the Oculus headset is go fishing. There's a fishing game, um, and it's super duper fun. Oh, what's up? What's up, Miss Shaw? Mira? Mira. I'm gonna guess it's Mira. I hope it's Mira. What's up from Houston? I'm actually gonna be in your neck of the woods this weekend. My daughter living the dance mom life, so that'll be super fun. So we're gonna be talking about gratitude in leadership and why it's important. Now, um, what I will say is, as always, Mira, yes, I got it right. And Carmen, really quickly, I just got to put this up here. Carmen says, we're talking about VR. She says she loves fishing and golf. And Mira, yes, I got it right. Mira, so that, or Myra, got it. I had to phonetically. I'm still I'm still trying to caffeinate for the day. Okay, so we're going to talk about leadership and particularly today about why gratitude is important. And so, as always, if you have questions, I want to encourage you, drop them in the chat. As you can see, I can see your comments as I'm going. So if you're watching on Facebook, if you're watching on YouTube, or you're joining me like Myra and Carmen on LinkedIn, I'm actually able to see it all. So I want to make this as interactive as possible. So if you have questions, if you have comments as we're going, dive in, ask the questions, because my goal is not to talk about what I want to talk about the entire time. It's really what's going to be important to you all as well. So let's hop in. So, why is gratitude important as leaders? When we think about um, the practice of gratitude in itself, I think there are two things. One, as leaders, I think gratitude is important because I think it puts a lot of things in perspective for us, right? So, if I think about it, can be very easy, especially as leaders, aspiring leaders, those who are type A, to kind of get focused on the thing and just driving towards it and not ever pausing to kind of be grateful for the moment, be grateful for what it is. And so I think there's something about, the shifting in our mindset that really happens when we try to actually create a gratitude paradigm as we're thinking about in leadership. Um, so, one of the questions we're just going to hop right in and ask is, so how can I genuinely express gratitude to my team without seeming contrived or disingenuous? So here's one. I like this question, and let me tell you why I like this question, particularly around leadership. So the question is, how can you express genuine gratitude with your team without it seeming contrived or disingenuous? This one is authentic gratitude. Basically, the question really is, how are you authentic in your gratitude, where you're not, thanks for doing a great job, and like the team receives it. I think authentic gratitude really does come from like noticing and appreciating like specific contributions. And I think when you start with if you start with specifics, I'm not even going to try to attempt that word this afternoon. If you start with things that are specific with each team member, I think that that can help with it not coming across as disingenuous or contrived, right? I think that particularly when you have people who are very goal oriented or performance oriented, I think it's harder to put in your mindset to actually go about creating the practice of gratitude with your team. And so, one of the best ways I think you can do that as a leader is get specific. Get very specific with their contributions. Get very specific with how they're appreciating what they're contributing as a team member, and that to me allows for that. And here's the other thing that I'll say, especially with leadership. And I don't even think this is just with leadership. I think this is with people in general. People want to feel seen, right? And so if you're busting your butt day in and day out, you have some leaders who are like, yeah, that's what I pay. I pay you to do the things. You get a paycheck. I give it, like it's an exchange. But if you treat it as just an exchange, then I think you will get just an exchange work from your people, right? So I think it becomes super duper important that we build that and acknowledge that. So Carmen says, I feel extremely fortunate to be working in a work culture that promotes servant leadership. I'm also enthusiastic about discussing this topic. I love it, Carmen. Servant leadership is so important. One of the questions that I'm often asked when I'm talking with recent grads or people who are trying to grow their career, how do I go about really like helping or recognizing, or how did I really like move my career forward? And the answer is I served first. And I think servant leadership is something that's not just it's not talked about enough. When you show up as leaders, we are my first customer as a leader was always my team first. I worked for them, they didn't work for me. So I think it's really, really important. Carmen also said it's important to celebrate the small wins. Exactly. I'm going to be talking about that as well. And I love this one too, Carmen. It says, whether it's simple thank you or more public recognition, expressing gratitude can help create a positive work culture and foster a sense of teamwork and collaboration. I agree. Because here's the thing, what you acknowledge, that's what you put your energy towards, that's what grows. And so when I have team members who are doing, even if it's just the littlest things, even if they're hopping in and they're working together, I celebrate them working together, because that is the thing that I want to grow. That's what I want to foster. That is the culture that I want to create. When I think about the gratitude paradigm in leadership, when I talk about even like my company, Culture by Design, you have to design and put these practices within your day-to-day practice as a leader, which we'll also hop into next as well. And so one with this, right? So Carmen mentioned small wins. We talk about the importance of just acknowledging and expressing our gratitude for people who are doing their job and doing exceptionally well at it. But here's one that I also think is important. So it says, how do you balance the need for constructive criticism, right, and the promotion of gratitude within the team? How do we balance the need for constructive criticism and the promotion of gratitude within the team? Now, this is another interesting paradigm, right? So you have to you have to make sure that you are giving feedback, right? And so in the process of making sure that you give feedback, you have to make sure that as you're giving feedback, you are also that you're also expressing gratitude as well. And it's a tough paradigm to kind of go in and do. So when I think about expressing feedback, even when actually, let me rewind. So when we go in and you've got to give constructive feedback and the promotion of gratitude within the same team, here's what I think really works really well. If we go back to what Carmen was saying, which was the importance of celebrating the small wins, right? When it comes time for constructive criticism, it makes it a lot easier to for people to be able to even receive it because you've put those deposits in. Now, I will say, sorry, here's what I'll say about this. I think of like this gratitude practice, this authentic feedback, this dialogue, healthy communication, open trust. All of these things build up on each other, right? Even when I'm giving constructive, even when I'm giving constructive criticism, I do typically find ways to find the wins within that. I don't know about you all, but maybe it's just me. But one of the things that I will say is when I typically can be very hard on myself, and I know, which team members also maybe carry a little bit of that trait as well. And so one of the things that I think is really important is even as we're giving the constructive feedback, I always try to find a way, I call it like the road to redemption, right? So even in your shortcomings, what is the road to redemption? Right. So if I'm coming in and I've worked on this project and the project didn't go how I thought it would, when I'm giving feedback on it or this assignment, when I'm giving feedback on, I'll say, hey, what do you think went well? And I would say, okay, awesome. This went well. This went, and I'm making sure that I am affirming, congratulating, recognizing, thanking them for the parts that they did, and then also making sure that I'm tying that feedback together. I don't necessarily always say, like, always give what they call like the feedback sandwich, which is something good, something negative, something good. Because depending on where that person is in the career, sometimes it don't make a sandwich. Right? You got to fold it in half. But nonetheless, I think it's important. Not I'm not always going to be able to give feedback in a sandwich scenario, but depending on it, I do make sure that as you're balancing this, building your team, the work within your team, that you do think about, hey, as I'm giving criticism, have I also given gratitude, appreciation across the board as well? Um, so let's see what Myra says. So Myra says, I enjoy teaching gratitude in a leadership development program for high school students. The earlier they get it, the better. Exactly. Myra, that is so huge. Like, I talk with my daughter often. She's in high school now. And we talk a lot about leadership and what does leadership look like when she's in the classroom? What does leadership look like when she's on the dance team? She's on a dance team, and how do you show up every single day doing that? So I think that is absolutely important. And I think honestly, I think high school students need it more today than ever before. Not to sound cliche, but they're inundated with so many things. And so the stuff like Myra, the stuff that you do, pouring into this next generation is imperative. And so I think it is how we show up, and how we really give back. Carmen says balancing constructive criticism with positive affirmations is crucial for effective feedback that promotes personal growth and professional growth. This can also build trust and transparency in the work relationship. Facts, Carmen. I have to snap that. Also good. Also good. Both of these points are so good. It is trust. I think I talked about a little bit about trust even last week or the week before. But this is huge, 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 in terms of that. So I love that. And Myra said, I love it. Keep telling her mom. Thank you. I appreciate that. It's not easy when you're put in leadership positions, because sometimes when you're in leadership, and this is why I think also gratitude, will tie it back into gratitude, but leadership is not easy, right? Especially if you're making a transition from being a peer to leading your peers when you're making a transition, just in general, around going from an individual contributor to a leadership role or becoming a leader of leaders. It is a tough transition. And so oftentimes one of the pitfalls I often see leaders fall into is they start to lead how they like to be led, right? So we see this often, right? So you'll see a leader, some leaders, some people don't require a pat on the back, right? Like that's not something that they require all the time. And so they typically sometimes will struggle with the kudos, with the gratitude, with the thank yous because they didn't need it. And it goes back to being really important. It's important to be intentional in how you go about leading your team, because if you are not, this would be a huge, this becomes like a stumbling block for you, right? It's like, hey, I did what I needed to do because I was driven. This is what I was supposed to do. I didn't need any thank yous. I didn't need any kudos, but that's not the thing that may make one person on your team tick. And so somebody on your team may have to take and be like, all right, let me figure this out. What does this look like for me? And getting to know your team in those one-on-ones. Hey, do you like to, what makes you tick, right? Like, what do you get excited about? What do you love about your job? All of those things matter in terms of making sure that you're understanding how to actually get the team going and keep them going. And so gratitude becomes a big key piece of this puzzle. Make sure that as you're going in, if you have any questions for me, feel free. We're talking about the gratitude paradigm in leadership, but be sure if you have other questions, I'm always open to ask away is what I'll say. So one of the things that I want to talk about now is we talk about being intentional in creating a gratitude paradigm in leadership. One of the things that I'm still seeing a lot of leaders struggling in is hybrid, right? So it used to be, right? So it used to be that you could hop in. I'll give you guys a great example. I think I want to say, yeah, I talked about it for sure last week, but it was easy to do what we call like drive-bys, right? Like, so everybody's in the office. You could come in, you could give a pat on the back, you could give some high fives, you could chop it up and be like, hey, thank you so much for hopping it out. And so I think it was very easy. I think it was a little bit easier when we didn't have like this hybrid work environment. And I think, a lot of companies are still trying to push to move that down the line. But I will say with that, hybrid's here to stay, y'all. And so we've got to figure this out. So what does it look like? What does it look like to have this or foster expressions of gratitude that are still impactful and that are still personal in a hybrid work environment? So that's what we're going to talk about now. So in a remote or hybrid work setting, how can we ensure that expressions of gratitude are still personal and they're also impactful? This one is super duper near to my heart because I don't think hybrid is the future. So as leaders, how do you do that? So now I'm not in person as much, or maybe I have one or two team members who are out, who are not in a hub. They're not in a major hub. I don't see them as often. How do you express gratitude to them? What does that look like in a hybrid work environment? So I think there's a couple of ways that you can go about doing it. One of my favorites is honestly picking up the phone. A lot of times I say picking up the phone. You guys know what I mean. Like I typically like whether it's Zoom, whether it's Slack, whether it's Teams. I make sure that I'm scheduling these touch points with my team day to day, especially if, as my team got larger, I didn't have as many one-on-ones. And so typically I had one-on-ones either biweekly or monthly. And so I'm not getting always as much interaction as I like as I grew to, like, I think I had a team of 12 or 14 at one point. And so what does that look like? How do I do that? How do I make sure? Well, if we have some quick fire that we have to knock out, once everything's done and the dust has settled, because remember, everybody's remote. right? So sometimes it's going in and hopping in and say, hey, you got a minute? Yep. Hey, just want to tell you thanks. Great job on this thing. I didn't want anything. Awesome job. And that's it. Nothing else. I don't talk work. I just say thank you. Or I'll send a note. One of the other ones is typically in like team chats, group chats. I know Teams has a feature. I'm pretty sure Slack has a feature as well where you can give kudos, where you can go in and do that. Really, really important in the remote environment that you are doing these shout outs, these virtual celebrations, because I think it becomes more oxygen, if you will, right? So if we're not doing this in the hybrid environment, I think you're missing a huge component. A lot of organizations have like some type of like employee recognition program. Some are where you can get points, like smaller points, all the way up to larger points. My company always went all the way up to like a game changer award. And then you have, some organizations kind of, you do little bonuses here and there. Those matter. I would almost venture to say if you are leading a hybrid team, it is imperative that you do it. I tried to get to a point where I would set aside time to at least like find one or two wins, and say shout outs, gratitudes, thank yous at least once a week, because it's oxygen. It's oxygen for the team. It's oxygen for the person. And in a hybrid environment, it becomes that more, you have to be that much more intentional. I think often when you get into a hybrid environment, um, it can uh, it can be easy just to continue just to go with the flow, just to continue to work. Okay, that call's done. I'm hop off this call, take my notes, send an email, go hop on to the next thing, right? But if we're not careful, that is kind of one of the pieces of the puzzle, that I think we have to be very intentional about. Carmen, yep, you already jumped the gun. I love it. So it says, don't forget the good old fashioned way to show gratitude is to send a physical thank you card or a small token or a physical gift to your colleagues. Facts. Do not forget that. I think the value of handwritten notes. I had a young lady who I kind of like, she came in, she was having a tough time. Her and I were talking, and so mentored her kind of and walked her through like this situation and talked with her. And she sent a hand. I still have this note. She sent me a handwritten note, and it was like a really beautiful bracelet. And I think that those things are just as important. You can never underestimate uh, actual, like a good old fashioned handwritten note. Like I'm still the person. I'm just gonna be honest, right? I'm gonna be honest. I'm still the person who will get a birthday card for people and like write in the birthday card, like like there's the blank page. I'm gonna try to probably fill that page up. It matters. It matters. So as leaders, don't underestimate it. Um, and I'll say this before I even go on. First of all, if you're joining, you're watching, if you're on YouTube watching, if you're on Facebook watching, if you're on LinkedIn, thank you so much for hopping in and just spending this time with me to chat about all things leadership. I appreciate it so much. This is always meant to be a dialogue. That's why I started this. So if you have any questions, please make sure that you ask them. I'll be able to put them up on live and see them, as well as comments, because this is meant to be a conversation, a place where we can all share and enjoy each other. So hop in, drop in, say what's up. Make sure you have questions. If you have questions, you have comments, you have you agree, you disagree. Let's go. I love it. I love it. So here's what I'll say. When we think about um, gratitude as leaders, one of the things that I found, I'm doing this survey. I'm building. So I'm in a master class, right? In this master class, we had to do a survey, And part of this survey was asking what the challenges are for leaders. And I'm going somewhere with this. Um, what are some of the challenges? And, what are some things that they really needed help with? And one of the things that came up across the board was communication up. Okay. Communication up. And so I think one of the bigger pieces of the puzzle, I don't even have like this question here, but this was just kind of like aha. But how do you build this culture if you're in the middle as a leader, or you're working in the middle? How do you help foster that up? How do you help, I like to say, lead up, lead across, right? Not just leading your team that you're leading. What does that look like? How do you help leaders who are leading you foster gratitude, if it's also not in them? And I think that, coaching up is, it's an art, but it's not hard, right? Like, it could easily be, one of the ways that, you could potentially help, as far as like, hey, you've got senior leadership and you want that boost of morale. Sometimes it may be like, hey, senior leader, just want to say, appreciate all your support for things. The team did this. I think it would be really awesome if at the next AHOD, or if you had a chance to write a note, or etc., the team would love to hear from you, right? Or if I'm giving the team a huge shout out, I may CC some senior leaders, and typically they chime back in. So those are ways that you can also help foster a culture of gratitude up the leadership chain, right? And that's leading by example. And I think that that's really important. And it's one that, um, I knew that it was probably going to come up as a challenge for leaders. And how do you build this servant leadership? How do you grow as a leader, as you're having to not just, lead your team, but lead across, and you're having to lead up, right? This is one of those pieces of the puzzle that you do, right? Like, it doesn't require a heavy lift. Um, and encouraging your senior leadership to foster that sense of gratitude, it goes a long way. And I know I've said it before, but it is like oxygen, right? You cannot stress enough the importance of saying thank you, to your team. All right, so one of the things, let's see, what other questions do I have? Oh, this one's good. Okay. um This question says, is there a place for gratitude even when the team is facing tough challenges or failures? Ooh, is there a place for gratitude when the team is facing tough challenges or failures? Um, there is always a place for gratitude, even when a team is facing tough challenges and failures. And I would venture to say that it matters even more, right? When we think about, if your team is coming up short, right? They're facing some challenges. They are coming up short. Um, when you're trying to practice gratitude, I think it's, so here's the thing. It's important, you can acknowledge the people without like degrading whether they came up short, or hit the challenge. And what I mean by that is, you can acknowledge the effort, you can acknowledge their resilience in the situation, even when the results weren't necessarily ideal, right? Because what this says to your team is, hey, I value, it reinforces the value of, one, of the actual process, like getting something, building something, putting something out there. And it values the learning, not just the outcomes. Right. So if you want to create a foster, like if you want to foster, like, people say, I'll foster a culture of innovation and high performance. All of that comes with risk. All of that will come with challenges. All of it will come with a level of failure. And so if you're able to practice or show gratitude, through the effort, through resilience, even when the results are not ideal, I think that is how you're going to start to build a team that builds up resistance and tolerance towards shortcomings, that allows them to continue to go forward. Right. That's important. So it's not just the value of the outcome. The outcome is important, but so is the process and so is learning, right? And so as we're leading through these times, it becomes I even think about um, I think about 2020. At the time I was not a people leader, but um it was hard. It was hard on so many levels. For those of us in states, you had a lot of social. There's a lot of social injustice happen. You had COVID. You had all of these things going on, and I think it was tough. Like for some people, it was tough just to show up. It was tough just to show up, and then it didn't stop. There were still these things that were ongoing, right? And I cannot express enough the importance of what it was like to be like, hey, man, we know it's hard. Thank you for showing up. And right now, thank you for giving your best. And we understand for some of you, your best right now is 80%, but thank you for the 80%. Oxygen, leaders, oxygen. I'm telling you, it matters. And you have to mean it. Because if you don't mean it, that's when gratitude can backfire, right? When you're not doing it thoughtfully, when you're not sincere about it, I think that's when it can hurt you. But it's important. You know, I even think about when I had team members who, for whatever reason, moved on to another role. It's time for them to move on to another role. Um, they wanted to grow their career. I always made sure to say thank you. Hey, thank you. I know some of these transitions, I know this might not have been easy. I know this is, but thank you for the contribution that you've made to this team. Thank you for trusting me to be your leader for the time that I was your leader. I appreciate your honesty. I appreciate your feedback. Thank you. What? Works wonders. Everybody, gratitude truly is the road to restoration and redemption. And it's so important as leaders that we don't forget that, right? We don't forget to recognize, because if we don't, and I'm not talking about like the fake blow smoke, like, oh, you're doing so great, nah, like genuinely mean it. Like, I get to do this every day. I get to lead people every day. So I'm already grateful as leaders. Actually, this is the question I'll ask you. As a leader, are you showing up every day and getting to say, I get to do this? I get to pour into people who are spending sometimes more time doing this job than they are sometimes with their families and spending anywhere else. I get to lead them. I get to pour into them, to inspire them, to get them, help them to show up, to see the best version of themselves, to produce the results that we want, to drive the values of an organization, the mission in which we're trying to fulfill. Do you show up with a level of gratitude that you get to do this? Because if you don't show up with that mindset, gratitude towards your team it becomes twice as hard. Twice as hard. That was the one thing that, like, a above everything else, I get to do this. That was the thing that really had me going, right? Carmen says, cultivating a culture of gratitude within a team can have a profoundly positive impact on the success and failure. Simply put, no one is perfect, including leadership. Facts. Facts. No one's perfect. I sure ain't. And even as leaders, when we're getting feedback as leaders, do you say thank you? Even if you don't agree. Even if you don't agree, do you say thank you for feedback? There have been times where I get feedback. I may not have agreed, might not have been the heart of my decision, but that was their perception of whatever that experience was or whatever that decision was. But I always thank them for the feedback. Do you want to know why? Because I never want to get to a point as a leader where my team doesn't trust me enough to give me honest feedback. Because there may come a time that I I'm going to need their honest feedback because I may have gotten it wrong. And because I got it wrong, um, they don't tell me because I've not responded previously in a heart or posture of gratitude that they've given me feedback. Because feedback is hard. Like nobody wants to be nobody wants to be wrong. Everybody wants to, I know Karma said, no one's perfect. I agree. No one's perfect. Everybody comes up short. But how you respond to the feedback matters. There've been plenty of times like, yo, that wasn't even what I was trying to do. Like that, it wasn't that. But thank you for your feedback. I will take this into consideration. And I do, and I mean it. Right? It doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to make the decision that they want, but it's important that we continue to foster that. So gratitude is another means. We've talked about trust a lot, but gratitude is a vehicle for trust. You want to build a high performing team, you've got to have a team that has high trust. They've got to have very, very high trust in you as a leader. You have to have high trust for them. High amount of trust for them as well as a team. Gratitude is a path. It's a vehicle. If you feel like you're moving slow in that, transparency, authenticity, gratitude are some ways that you can build, and you can maybe put a little boost on it, right? Like for those of you all who watch like Fast and Furious or something, like put the little boosters on a car. That's how you do that, right? Is honesty, feedback. Okay, so before I hop in, once again, thank you so much for joining me. If you have questions, make sure that you put them in. If you have comments, I see them as well. For everybody who's joining me on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, I'm excited that you all are joining me. I appreciate the time that you're taking to engage in these meaningful conversations around building culture every single week. For those who are new, I am live every single Tuesday at 2 p.m. Central Standard Time, where we talk about all things leadership and go from there. So I will say, if you're not a part of my newsletter, go to latoyacollinsjones.com, hop in there. Typically, what I've been doing is taking some of these newsletter topics and converting them over into AMA with LCJ, because I think it's a nice little roundabout way, if you will, to kind of round out the conversation. So if you, to kind of tie them all together. If you have questions, let me know. I want to know what's on your mind, what's burning, what questions do you have around the gratitude paradigm in leadership. I want to hear them. I want to know. I'm excited. All right, so let's see. We've got some more questions here. Okay, this is a good one. This is a good question. Okay, how can leaders tailor their gratitude to be meaningful to different personalities and cultural backgrounds within their team, right? How can leaders tailor their gratitude to be meaningful to different personalities and cultural backgrounds within their team? So when you think about how you can tailor your gratitude to be meaningful based on different personalities and cultural backgrounds, I will say we'll go back to the thing that I probably talk about the most and ad nauseum, because it never gets old. I can't overstate it enough. Know your team. You have to know your team, especially when you are leading. When you are leading organizations that are multinational organizations, right? So you may have team members across the globe. It is even more imperative that you understand culture, right? What makes that person feel appreciated, right? Some people, and here's the thing, we'll cover both things. So we talked about personalities and we talked about different backgrounds. So first, let's talk about personalities. I I like to just ask, like, hey, like, how do you feel? What makes you feel appreciated? What makes you tick? That's what I start with, right? Some people actually do not like public recognition. I know it sounds crazy, at least for me, because I'm an extrovert and I may or may like the limelight here or there. But some people may not want to be publicly recognized, or they're more like, hey, they like kind of thank you behind closed doors. They're good with that. And there are some people who want to be publicly recognized. That is important to them. You should know as a leader probably who those people are on your team. Okay. It's really important. So personality wise, it's good to kind of know. And I hear this often from team members. Am I supposed as a leader? Am I supposed to know all this about everyone? Yes. Yes, you are. I wish I could tell you something different, but I'm not. Yes, you are supposed to know. You should know how to optimize every single person on the team. And here's what I'll say. I'm gonna give you an example. I'm gonna do you one better because I like talking in analogies and examples, right? Let's use baseball. Baseball, you have 9 people on the field. Got a catcher, got a pitcher, got 3 outfielders, got 4 infielders. Yeah, that equals 9. I just wanted to make sure. I had to make sure I was mathing right. Oh, me and basic math. Okay, you have 9 people on a team. Okay, when they're in the outfield, when they're on defense, when you are defending, like when you're basically we'll say on defense, right? Like you're out there and you're playing, you've got your pitcher pitching, catcher catching. If the balls are hitting, they're fielding the balls, the whole 9. You absolutely need to know who's good at what. Now, as you get higher up the ranks, people get more specialized, right? And so typically that outfielder does exceptionally well, but you also know that if something were to happen, that outfielder actually is also a really great first baseman, right? So they know exactly what that person's weaknesses are, what's making them tick. How do you get the best out of every single? That's 9, right? And that's not even a full roster, okay? And then you go in because you still got like relief pitchers. There's typically probably more than a couple of more people who are playing more than one position, right? You've got the farm league. And now you go into batting. Okay. And so for every single person, everybody has a batting average. You know who has speed, you know who doesn't, you know who's a great designated hitter, who you may need to sub for a run, like all they know all of these things about their players in order to optimize their ability to win a game. Are you looking at your team the same way? I know exactly, hey, if I'm in a pinch, if I'm in a bind, and I need something done really hard, like it may be fast, I may have to give like limited details, but I know this person can grind it out and get it done. Like, who can I give this to that would be able to do that? There's absolutely, you should know who that is on your team. There may be someone says, hey, I've got this project, it's really thorough, it needs to be thorough. Deep understanding. I need them to go research all of these things. You should know who that person is too. Right? Hey, actually I need this presentation done, but I need it done in my communication style. Who knows you best to be able to at least start that process? All of that matters. So you should be able to give personalized levels of gratitude because you know your team that well. Do you know your team that well? Do you know your players that well? In order to build a high performing team, and like even if we go back to talking about balancing like constructive criticism and gratitude, I will tell you there are times where, I may be coaching someone up and having these conversations and really trying to get them to kind of move to this next level. When they get it, yo, it's a party. It's a party. It's a party. Hey, if you know that song, if not, I don't know what to tell you. But that's important, right? So as you're thinking about this as leaders, yes, you should be able to give feedback. For those of you who are just joining, we're talking about tailoring gratitude and feedback, good feedback, to different personalities and cultural backgrounds within your team. You should know. You should know. No excuses, right? Remember, if we come as leaders and we show up with the mindset that we get to do this, 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 then that in and of itself will shift how you think about your team and how you show up. And I wish I could tell you that every day, when I was actively leading a team, I showed up and was like, yay, I get to do this. I didn't. But you've got to find what makes that. How do you turn that on? This is important. Leadership and how we lead and show up for others is so important. So we've got 15 minutes left. Thank you all once again for joining me. We're talking about the gratitude paradigm in leadership. I want to end with one other question, but just want to make sure I'm checking the chat just to make sure I don't have any questions. Okay. Carmen asked the question. Oh, this is a good question, Carmen. Carmen says, how do you practice gratitude leadership with those who have imposter syndrome? Ooh. Great question, Carmen. This is a really, really good question. So one of the things, I was just watching a video with Myron Golden, and he was talking about the whole phenomenon of imposter syndrome. And, oftentimes with imposter syndrome, it's people undervaluing their actual worth, what they actually can do, right? It's a level of confidence. And so how do you practice that when you have people on your team who struggle with imposter syndrome? So one of my favorite things is this, Carmen. I tell people this. Now I can use this in any scenario that you could possibly think of. But one of the things that I like to say all the time is I don't fight with feelings, I fight with facts. And so oftentimes when I see someone maybe who is struggling with imposter syndrome, I probably will typically go out of my way to encourage them along the way. And so what that may look like is going in and saying, hey, you did this really great. And I'm very, very specific, because typically as someone who is struggling with imposter syndrome is they're not believing their own hype. And I think even for me, for the longest, I even struggled with it. But then I heard something. I was at a retreat. I was at a retreat called Camp Well, and I heard something, and it changed. It shifted my mindset. It said, "I'm not arrogant. I'm just accurate." Right? I'm not arrogant. I'm just accurate. And I think it really helped shift my mindset on how I thought about, I am who I am. I'm good at what I do, and I can authentically show up. And so part of this practice of gratitude leadership is, how do you help people see themselves how you see them? And a lot of times that's having what we call good old receipts. You've got to help them do that. So as leaders, like, hey, thank you for knocking this out. And so the other thing that I think can be a really good practice, Carmen, for gratitude leadership with those who are struggling with imposter syndrome, believe it or not, is stretch them. Stretch them a little bit, right? And so oftentimes, and now what I'm about to tell you is only practice this if you know your team really well. There are times where I may have someone who I know is doing exceptionally well, and they still may be struggling to believe if they're doing well. And so what I will do is I will find something that I know that they can excel at. They're really good. They may be slightly hesitant, and I will, as they say, push them into the deep end. Because it's important that they find ways to stretch and not always play it safe. And when they do that, I'm always there supporting them. I typically will make sure that they're not going to, flub it up completely, but finding ways to help them build that up. Because for me, I think it's important to tell them thank you and recognize and appreciate the work that they're doing. But I think it's also just as important to make sure that we're addressing the imposter syndrome. I think if we're not careful, imposter syndrome can morph into self-sabotage very, very fast. And you can sometimes see this in some of your highest performers. And so how do you go about making sure that they're not falling into that trap? And so it can be this appreciation, it can be gratitude. One of the biggest things um, that I had to learn how to do was even to accept compliments in words of appreciation, right? I think um, there I would say there's almost like this unconscious thing, right? Like, let me know if you guys have done it. Someone's like, "Oh man, thank you so much for doing blah 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 blah." You'd be like, "Oh, it was nothing." But meanwhile, you might have moved heaven and earth to make that happen, right? Right? Move you did all the things to make it happen, right? And somebody tells you thank you, and you'd be like, "Oh, it was nothing." I've learned that when somebody says thank you, way to go, I say thank you. And I learned to sit with it. And so sometimes with those who are struggling with imposter syndrome, it may just be teaching them to sit in their awesomeness as well. I hope that helped. I hope that helped, Carmen. Hope that helped. Felt like I was rambling for a minute, but I got there. I arrived somehow. It might have been messy, but that's kind of where I think about it, because the part of me really wants to address as a leader. I think there's a lot that we can do, but I really do believe that sometimes we have to go at the root of the issue. And I think the root of the issue, even even if I'm trying to practice um, gratitude, like a form of gratitude, leadership um, towards that person, the root of it all to me would be addressing the imposter syndrome, right? If that makes sense. But great question. That was an awesome question. All right. I think we got time for one more question. Or if you have any other questions, make sure you drop them in. And so thank you so much for joining me. So this last question I think is so, so, so important. Last question is, how can I integrate gratitude practices into my existing leadership and management routines? How can I integrate gratitude practices into my existing leadership and management routines? Listen, this one is so important to me. I will go back, if I'm pretty sure I've quoted James Clear almost every single AMA with LCJ at this point, but you do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. If you do not create and design it, right? If you don't design a practice of gratitude within your function, within your rhythm or routine as a leader, it's not going to happen. When we think about the Eisenhower matrix, right? When we think about the Eisenhower matrix, you've got the main two where people spend a lot of time, right? Are things what I call them, like your firefighting, right? Things that are important and urgent. You have to address those. You don't want to spend a ton of time there, but at the end of the day, you've got to spend some time. If something is important and something is urgent, you have to knock it out, right? Those things are important. So you have that. But when I think about this gratitude practice and making sure that you're recognizing your team members, typically these are things that I would put that in the important but not urgent quadrant 2. The importance of that is it is still important. Although it's not urgent, it's still important, which means that you should schedule it. Right? This could be starting a meeting with a round of appreciations, right? Like, go through, if you start a meeting, say, hey, like, I'm gonna pick a person, everybody chat what they love about that person, right? If you could go in and say, hey, it's such and such birthday, like, let's tell them how awesome they are and how much you appreciate them. What's one thing you like about them, right? Like, you have to build this in as a practice. It looks different for different people, for different organizational cultures, but it's not just about saying thank you, right? It's about showing through your actions realistically, right? That you value them, their success, their well-being, right? And so when you get into creating it as a practice, whether that's on a team meeting, whether it's an end of week reflection email highlighting how awesome the team did, there's so many ways that you can weave it into your practice. the importance is that you create it as a practice. There's a reason why I said the gratitude paradigm, because part of this is you have to be intentional. Just like you have to design, I talk about culture by design. That was a very intentional way that I wanted to name the organization because of that. You have to design your culture. If you want a culture of the team saying thank you and shouting each other out, that's how I knew I figured it out. When the team would shout out each other and I didn't have to do anything, I knew I had it. Right? They were telling each other thank you. They were lifting each other up. They were saying thank you. They were giving each other shout outs. All of that was happening without me. That's how you know you've created a culture that is going to excel at that. And so, as leaders, if you don't build it into the practice of the day to day stuff, right? Maybe it's a personal, a win of the week. Just think about like employee of the month. I don't know why I have an aversion towards employee of the month. Maybe it's just I've just watched too much TV and I think it's like a combo of like favoritism and nepotism wrapped into one. Right? So maybe not employee of the month, but find a way to celebrate your team and celebrate them regularly. What gets scheduled gets done. Are you scheduling time within your week, within your day, within your week, within your month, within your quarter as a leader to express gratitude? Because remember, we don't have to be leaders, we get to be leaders. And so it's important that as leaders, we recognize that we get to do this. And as a result of that, that we wouldn't be in the position we are without the people doing what they do, right? And so if you maybe even struggle, like, and actually, I'll end this with here. I'm going to give a bonus, because even as I'm talking about all this, I know like there are leaders who may be struggling with the team member or two or three, hopefully not four, but like you haven't figured it out yet. You haven't found your groove. Right. And so it's like, I told you, I don't even know how to practice gratitude. I'm just struggling. I'm just trying to get like a grasp on the team or a grasp on this team member who's maybe problematic. I'm going to challenge you. This is the challenge. I want you to take every single day, put it in a notes app, put it on a sheet of paper, put it in a notebook, whatever you need to do. And every day I want you to write down one good thing that you're thankful for that person today. One good thing. If you're struggling just being a leader right now, and be like, Toya, honestly, I'm struggling just to show up. Then I'm going to flip it. Instead of the person, I'm going to tell you what I want you to do is actually every single day for the rest of this month is to write down one thing you're thankful for about the work that you get to do. And if you do it every day, I promise you, it will shift and change how you see the work that you do, how you see the people that you serve, and the company the company, organization, or community that you get to impact at large. Right? So that's my challenge to you. I'm throwing down the gauntlet. I want to see it from you all. And if you're an individual contributor watching watching the show, I want to encourage you to do it. Create a gratitude practice around your work and see if that doesn't shift how you show up. All right, look, that's all I've got for you today. We're going to end a couple of minutes early. I don't have any other questions, but Carmen, Myra, everyone else, thank you for hopping in. Thank you for this conversation. Thank you for giving me this time. I don't take it lightly. I appreciate it. I look forward to talking to you all next week. As I always like to say, be awesome, make a difference, in peace.